Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 2019 Gates Annual Lecture. And I'm delighted to welcome you on behalf of Gates Cambridge Trust and the Gates Scholar community to this lecture, and our distinguished lecturer, Irina Bokova. Irina Bokova is from Bulgaria and served for 2 terms as the Director General of UNESCO from 2009 to 2017. And she is, in fact, the first woman and the first Eastern European to lead the organization, and did so to great acclaim. Having graduated from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, she was then a fellow at the University of Maryland before completing an executive program at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and then began her career at the United Nations Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria. She was twice elected a Member of Parliament, served as Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, and was the Bulgarian government's first Secretary for European Affairs. And among many other roles, she was the Bulgarian Ambassador to France, Monaco, and UNESCO. As Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova was actively engaged in the United Nations efforts to adopt Agenda 2030 for sustainable development, which included quality education for all, gender equality, and, of course, the protection of the world's cultural heritage. She actively promotes culture as a driver for development, along with science and innovation. Irina Bokova has received state distinctions from more than 40 countries across the world and has received many honorary accolades and doctorates from many universities. Among several roles currently, she's a member of the board of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens and a member of the Leaders for Peace, which is an NGO chaired by the former French Prime Minister, Jean-Pierre Raffarin. I discovered when reading about Irina recently that she could deliver her lecture in any one of 5 languages, but I hope this evening it is going to be in English. And I would like you to welcome her to the stage to give her lecture. The title has changed slightly, but essentially, Why Heritage Matters. Irina.
Thank you very much, Barry. Thank you for this very, very kind presentation. I will be speaking today on the topic of why heritage matters, and of course about culture and heritage as a bridge to dialogue and reconciliation, a topic that, as you can imagine, is very dear to my heart. And of course, I'm very honored to be here. It's an immense pleasure. And also to give this annual already Gates Cambridge lecture on a topic that I would say is very much inscribed into the history of your university. It is a pleasure, of course, to be in front of such an illustrious audience in one of the oldest universities, because walking on the streets, you see heritage and history all around. And the reputation, of course, of Cambridge as an outstanding academic institution reflects the intellectual achievements of I would say, generations after generations of scholars. And I could, of course, hardly enumerate all the world-renowned scholars that have moved almost beyond the impossible, the boundaries of human imagination and knowledge, and who have thus contributed to the exploration of many disciplines of sciences. And last but not least, it's a pleasure to be here at Cambridge University because it is renowned also, among other things and achievements, for its first-class archaeological and anthropological research, and for its never-ending curiosity in expanding its academic and geographical scope. Allow me to start this lecture of mine slightly on a personal note. I was elected for the first time as Director General of UNESCO in 2009 on the basis of a platform that I drafted and submitted to the organization under the title UNESCO in a Globalized World, New Humanism for the 21st Century. I was then, and I'm still deeply convinced, that the course of history, its unprecedented acceleration, is bringing extraordinary opportunities, but also huge challenges. These historic shifts necessitate the right approach, the right compass to guide us into the future. And this compass should be a new approach towards humanism, an idea, one could say, as old as humanity itself. This is the idea of humanism expressed by the spirit of Ubuntu, human kindness, in the African language and culture Bantu, by Confucius, by the 19th century Indian humanist Swami Vivekananda, and so many others. Humanism is also the conviction every woman and man can become everything they aspire to, what Michel de Montaigne, the French Renaissance thinker, called la hauteur extrême de l'humaine nature, the highest expression of human nature. But although it seems individualistic, it is at the same time a belief in a single humanity embodied by each of us. The late Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe once wrote, "You must find a way to accept something, however small, from the other to make you whole." I believe a similar humanist conviction guides UNESCO, the United Nations Organization for Education, Science, Culture, and Communication. Its constitution says that since wars start in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. This phrase was penned by Prime Minister Clement Attlee with the help of Archibald MacLeish, the US Librarian of Congress. UNESCO is based in Paris, but it was born here in your country. The idea emerged in 1942 when the United Kingdom started convening conferences of allied ministers of education. Many of these ministers worked for governments in exile from countries under occupation. The war was far from over. Despite this, Britain was already promoting cooperation in education as a force for peace. UNESCO was forged by this belief that peace must be defended by new ways, ways that start in the minds of women and men. This is relevant now, as it was in 1945, in a very different world, in different times of globalization, connectivity, and interdependence. And coming back to the beginning of my lecture, I believe also there is nothing more humanistic as an idea and as an expression than heritage and culture. And there is nothing more convincing and compelling to all of us that we are all a single community than our common heritage. As the Cambridge Heritage Research Centre rightfully states in its mission statement, heritage is a rapidly growing field of fundamental contemporary significance. It is a key element in the way diverse institutions, political movements, and communities recognize their identities, attribute value, contest rights, claims, and realize their political and economic strategy. And it continues, where history is the study of the past, heritage is the many ways the past is used in the present. Heritage can be understood as an active, dynamic relationship between then and now, formed through an ongoing process of renegotiation, reconstruction, and recreation of what we choose to take from the past with us into the future. I share this vision because protecting a world heritage is one of the most positive, visionary, and transformative ideas that emerged in the last century. This is the idea that heritage belonging to different cultures may represent outstanding universal value and should be protected by international law, embodied in the World Heritage Convention. This is the idea that humanity stands united in all its diversity around shared values. The idea that all cultures are different, but that difference does not divide. On the contrary, it should unite. Cultural heritage, indeed, is our bridge from the past to the future. Culture and heritage are not about bricks and stones. They are about identities and belonging. They carry values from the past that are important for societies today and tomorrow. Heritage is the way we understand the world and the means by which we shape it. Heritage is about the past in as much as about the future. I believe this is the meaning of the 1972 UNESCO Convention on the Protection of World's Cultural and Natural Heritage, based on the respect and recognition exactly of this outstanding universal value of monuments, sites, temples, historic cities, and landscapes that embrace all the diversity of humanity. This idea, indeed, is visionary. It brought into focus a vision of humanity standing unite in its diversity, and the vision that cultures indeed are different, but this difference should unite us. The idea of giving birth to the World Heritage Convention, this great visionary, happened in the United States. The man that strongly promoted this idea was the Honorable Russell Train. Russell Train left an indelible mark on the environmental protection in the United States and globally, being one of the founders of the World Wildlife Fund. But also, I think he brought a different vision on the heritage protection. He participated in 1965 in the White House Conference, and it was his discussions with, at that time, Dr. Joseph Fisher, chairman of the Committee on Natural Resources, that produced the call for the creation of a World Heritage Trust. And in their words, the idea was to identify, establish, develop, and manage the world's superb natural and scenic areas and historic sites for the present and the future benefit of the entire world citizenry. This concept emerged in the 60s and found its ultimate expression with the operation to rescue the Nubian temples, whose anniversary in Egypt, whose anniversary we are celebrating this year. Heritage, indeed, is the way we understand the world and the means by which we shape it. It is a source of energy that is endlessly renewable, that provides a foundation of wisdom and knowledge upon which to build a better future, that also provides income and jobs to local communities, social inclusion, and social cohesion. But this does not happen by itself. As Russell Train said, protecting the world's cultural and natural heritage calls for vision, courage, and commitment, and it cannot be taken for granted. Today, there are 1,073 sites inscribed on the World Heritage List. There are 31 World Heritage sites only here in the United Kingdom and its territories, 25 cultural, 5 natural, and 1 mixed. The first sites in the United Kingdom to be inscribed on the World Heritage List were Giant's Causeway and Causeway Coast, Durham Castle and Cathedral, Iron Bridge, Gorge, Studley Royal Park, including the ruins of Fountains Abbey, Stonehenge, Avery, and associated sites, and I will continue this long, long list. The last site to be inscribed was the Lake District in England in July 2017. I believe all of these sites bear a history and also bear the marks of identity, of local community, and wider. In the United States, because we're speaking where the World Heritage idea was born, there are 23 sites, which include 10 cultural, 1 mixed, and 12 natural heritage sites, and most of them, of course, being national parks. The country has cultural sites created by the Native Americans, like the Taos Pueblo. There are also sites for the rich American history, for example, the Statue of Liberty and the Independence Hall in Pennsylvania. And also, the country has the largest collection of natural World Heritage sites that are vast in size and with varied climate and biodiversity. The World Heritage sites in the US thus represent this incredible story of America and the remarkable diversity of its people. And each of the sites that I just mentioned, be it in the UK or the US, is unique, and each matters for all humanity. This is exactly the meaning of outstanding universal value. Cultural heritage also, I believe, is our most democratic resource, and every time it is destroyed, a precious link with the past, our history, and our identity disappears. When I took over the leadership of UNESCO, I could never imagine the challenge of protecting heritage against the rising tide of violent extremism, of brutal and systematic destruction of cultural heritage, used as a tactic of war to intimidate populations, to disseminate hatred, what I have called at the time cultural cleansing. We have all seen in recent years how heritage came at the front line of modern conflicts by extremists in Mali, in Syria, in Iraq, with the aim of erasing histories and identities. Bamiyan Buddhas, Palmyra, Mosul, the mausoleums of Timbuktu bear the scars of deliberate and barbaric attacks. Looting of sites and illicit trafficking of antiquities depleted people, communities of their identities. Only in Iraq, more than 100 religious sites, Sunni, Shia, Christian, Yazidi, and others, have been destroyed. We have come to understand better that attacks against culture are attacks against the very identity, our own identity as people. They lead to devastation that can be irreparable, making reconciliation all the more difficult. The deliberate destruction by extremists of our common humanities heritage in countries, as I mentioned, Mali, Syria, Iraq, not only shocked us all, but has shown to all of us the importance of its preservation as a message of sharing common values and mutual respect. And we have seen also how much cultural heritage is vital for peace, for reconciliation, for social transformation, and part and parcel of efforts to safeguard peace. It becomes nowadays an important part of security and humanitarian response in crisis situations. And this has strengthened my conviction in the growing relevance of heritage and culture today. I believe that in the face of deliberate destruction of cultural heritage by extremist groups, of looting of antiquities, of cultural cleansing, a new understanding of why cultural heritage matters has emerged. The understanding that protection of heritage cannot be delinked from the protection of human lives in times of conflict, in case of emergency, that it is a key security issue. Often the first victim of war, culture can restore ties that have been broken, because culture heals. Heritage, as I said, is not only about bricks and stones, it is about us, humanity, in our diversity. And it gains meaning when it is inscribed in the lives of people and local communities. It is also a tool for reconciliation in many parts of the world today, because heritage can give confidence and help reconcile individuals with the globalizing world. I have a deep conviction that protecting heritage is not a luxury that can be left for better days. When I look back at the UNESCO response to the difficult and very challenging time of the crisis, we needed to look for new ways of thinking. It meant for us acting outside, sometimes the culture box, by building broad coalitions, by connecting the dots between the humanitarian, the security, and the cultural imperatives. We strengthen our fight against the illicit trafficking of cultural objects from Iraq and Syria, based on the 1970 UNESCO Convention against the illicit trafficking of cultural property. The United Nations Security Council 2199, adopted in January 2015, which was about financing of terrorism and had 3 paragraphs about why we should also, and banning the illicit trafficking of objects from Syria and Iraq, in fact, broke new grounds, banning cultural trade under the Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations. And I believe this in itself already was a major step linking cultural issues with security matters. And it placed a special responsibility on UNESCO and other important players, such as Interpol, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, International Council of Museums, World Customs Organization, and others. And tasked by the Security Council, UNESCO supported governments to strengthen legislation, to adopt a new ones, to build capacities, to deepen information sharing. With the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, for example, we have launched a training program for judges and prosecutors to connect the fight against illicit trafficking with that of money laundering and corruption. And this is why we felt the need to bolster coordination among law enforcement agencies, experts, museums, auction houses, and working also with customs authorities to improve the communication tools to facilitate the identification of cultural heritage fraud and suspicious items. As a result, more than 60 governments have amended their legislation or adopted a new one in order to respond to the need for stronger measures and for better coordination efforts. Antiquities from Syria and Iraq have been seized in many countries, in Jordan, in Lebanon, Turkey, United States, UK, Finland, and others, and this must continue so they can be returned to where they belong. But of course, we are far from over. States must continue to strengthen cooperation through joint actions, strong political commitment, and information sharing. Countries like France, for example, have started to integrate the protection of heritage in training their armed forces. And this, I believe, is an important step. And we have seen consecutive decisions by the United Nations Security Council to integrate the protection of heritage into the peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA. And it was the first time ever that this was happening by decision of the Security Council. And let me also underline the importance of the cooperation between UNESCO and the International Criminal Court, because if the Rome Statute of the ICC declared that intentional destruction of building buildings dedicated to religion, education, art, science, or charitable purposes when there is no military justification is a war crime. And one of the responses also to this deliberate destruction was the establishment of close partnership between the International Criminal Court and UNESCO. And I'm proud to say today that nowadays there is much higher recognition of the link between culture, heritage, and security concerns. And following the Security Council Resolution 2199, in 2017, the United Nations Security Council adopted, I would say, several landmark resolutions, and particularly the one in March 2347 on the protection of heritage in conflict and its role in peace building. This, I believe, was a historic achievement for all of us who believe that heritage can unite us as nothing and never before, and that we should not let it be destroyed, and also who believe that without heritage and understanding the past, there can be no peace and no future. And it was followed by other important resolutions, among them Resolution 2379 on Daesh's accountability, which once again underscored the link between the destruction of heritage and attacks on human lives. I insist on this because I have to share that at the beginning of this rise of violent extremism and their terrorist attacks, it was not that obvious that the link between this huge humanitarian crisis, the attacks on communities, on minorities, was not very easy to put this link and to say that destruction of heritage is part and parcel of this huge crisis. It is difficult at the beginning to say that, and I was even criticized at some points, to say that it is about the two sides of one and the same coin, because these attacks are attacks against our identities and our standing as a common humanity. And here I once again want to cite the words of Russell Train when in 2002, on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention in Venice, he said the following: "At this particular time in history," he said, "as the fabric of civilized human society seems increasingly under attack by forces that deny the very existence of a shared heritage, forces that strike at the very heart of our sense of community, I'm convinced that World Heritage holds out a contrary and positive vision of human society and our common future." These words, I believe, capture the very spirit of the World Heritage. And although years have passed, these words have lost none of their relevance or urgency. And on the other side, 10 years later, in 2012, in Timbuktu, in Mali, during attacks against the city's mausoleums and mosques, the French news agency AFP interviewed a man said to be part of the extremist group Ansar Din. "There is no World Heritage," this man declared, in reply to UNESCO's call for its protection. "This thing does not exist." I think this expresses strikingly the challenge that we face and that Russell Train was speaking about, the need to counter visions of culture that are static, narrow, exclusive. This, I believe, is also the vision that culture has a power to mobilize, to rebuild, to reconcile, to renew, to heal. And I remember visiting Timbuktu in 2013 with the French president at the time, François Hollande, after the extremists were pushed away, and I could witness the devastating effect of the destruction of the millennial heritage, mausoleums, manuscripts, what this had on the local communities. 2 years later, I went back to inaugurate the reconstructed mausoleums that UNESCO has been leading, the 14 mausoleums, and my meeting with the local communities on that occasion was not only emotional, but highly, I believe, symbolic. And I had the feeling as if I was giving back to the people of Timbuktu their own identity. A decade earlier, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we saw former enemies join forces to rebuild the Mostar Bridge destroyed by war. While there are over 1,000 sites inscribed on the World Heritage List, only 2 were inscribed following their reconstruction: Mostar Bridge in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the historic center of Warsaw, totally destroyed during the Second World War. I think this was a powerful message. This was a message that culture and heritage can foster rebirth, can reconcile, and can heal. So I believe the World Heritage embodies this great humanist idea that people of all cultures and faiths can unite around places of outstanding universal value. When a World Heritage Site is destroyed anywhere in the world, we are all diminished, even if it is from another religion, another period, another culture, another region. When we visit World Heritage Site anywhere in the world, in Jerusalem and in Istanbul, from the streets of Warsaw to the mountains of Machu Picchu, we find the same fundamental human aspirations. We see how cultures influence each other, how they are irresistibly intertwined. Among the 14th World Heritage Sites in Poland, the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau stands as a universal place of remembrance of the genocide of the Jews in memory of all the victims of the Holocaust. And also, I think this is a powerful call to foster human rights and reject racism, denial, all forms of anti-Semitism today. And the other aspect, of course, is the promotion of heritage and cultural diversity as an enabler of sustainable development, a driver for strong economies, for stronger societies, providing decent jobs and decent future. Because I do believe that World Heritage is not just a list of marvelous sites. It is a vision for peace, carved in stone and cultural landscapes, with the power to change the minds of women and men, to shape a different future for all. I think this is also the meaning of the 1972 Convention. And I believe that if you look at the World Heritage List, it is an open book of humanity's history, of diversity, of creativity, of aesthetics, of imagination. I deeply believe that all cultures flow into the same river, that of human civilization, and that there is no pure culture in the world. No culture has ever flourished in isolation. In the long history, in the long thread of history, cultures have always mingled, enriched, and influenced each other. And today, more than ever, we must counter any movement to isolationism by renewing respect towards other cultures. We must show how all cultures are intertwined, how all have been enriched by mutual exchange, fashioning complex, sometimes identities, producing multiple sources of belonging. Because culture is deeply ingrained within us, it shapes, of course, our identity and perceptions, and at the same time, every culture is composite, alive, and enriched by others. And the result is the formidable and unprecedented diversity of humanity. I recognize that there is a very fine line between pride in one's culture and intolerance towards what is different. And in order to walk on this fine line, we need understanding and knowledge about the other. Many of the answers come through education, and this is a point I want to emphasize. This requires education systems founded on inclusive principles that combat stereotypes and prejudice. We need to foster education for cultural literacy, education for mutual respect, and international understanding. We need to foster global citizenship education that UNESCO included in the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development within the goal of education. So our notion, I believe, of culture has broadened significantly over the decades. The 2001 UNESCO Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity was signed by every one of our member states. And as the declaration compellingly states, cultural diversity widens the range of options open to everyone. It is one of the roots of development, understood not simply in terms of economic growth, but also as a means to achieve a more satisfactory intellectual, moral, and spiritual existence. So heritage is a resource for future generations. We need to take a fresh look at its meaning. And here you allow me to show a couple of images which will illustrate some of my talk here on why heritage matters and how important it is in times of conflict and also in times of peace and reconciliation. So I will start by showing the Bridge of Mostar. A Bridge of Mostar with the different images of when it was, and it was in 1980 when it was destroyed for no military purpose because it's a pedestrian bridge. It's not something that has any type of military strategic. It was destroyed precisely with the aim and purpose to show that the communities in Mostar, this multicultural city, cannot talk to each other. It was a highly symbolic, I would say, gesture of war, of attack on the identities and on the people. So then it was a temporary, and then it was rebuilt, restored in 2004 under the auspices and the leadership of UNESCO. And the next year, it was inscribed on the World Heritage List. When it was destroyed, the Bridge of Mostar was not on the World Heritage List. And it is an old, of course, bridge from the Ottoman times. The next, this is the inauguration, just the enthusiasm of the inauguration of the Bridge of Mostar. And I was very happy that in 2015, I went there for the 10th anniversary of its inscription on the World Heritage Site, and I could see how important in this, indeed, this highly symbolic for the communities in the city, and I would say for the country, for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and for all the Southeast Europe. Of course, the Bamiyan Buddhas, we all know this horrible, the story of its destruction, the blowing away, and it really stays as a highly, I would say, a symbolic act of denial of this kind of a cultural dialogue, respect for the others. I know that at that time, my predecessor was trying to send some messengers so that it does not happen, but it did happen. And at that time, I think we all were shocked, but to be frank, I thought that it is so outrageous that it's not going to happen again. It's so much outside the scope of what we stand for. And unfortunately, with the rise of violent extremism, we saw more destruction. And here is the work that, once again, under the auspices of UNESCO, is being carried out in order to stabilize the rock of the Buddhas, because it is not just, I would say, the statues that were destroyed, but still there is a lot of danger of them falling apart. Here is what I was talking about Timbuktu, the mausoleums of Timbuktu. And this is the images that we have seen on social media also that were widely distributed by these extremists. And somewhere is also al-Mahdi, who was convicted later by the International Criminal Court for committing a war crime. He admitted it, and he's in prison now. And then he appealed to the others not to continue destroying the mausoleums. Here is the destroyed mausoleums, some of them. And here is our visit with the President Francois Hollande. We were in Ahmed Baba Library, with the burnt manuscripts that are thrown because extremists did not have time even to damage all of them, hopefully, and the vast majority were still kept into the basement in boxes. But of course, we are seeing here the horror of this, and you have to know that these more than 800,000 manuscripts are kept by families in Timbuktu from one generation to another. They're kept, and afterwards we made a big campaign also for their digitalization and to preserve and protect as many as we could. This is, I just wanted to show that when the peacekeepers were coming to Mali, we, of course, we were giving maps of where the heritage sites are there, why they're important, and we prepared this small booklet. It's a passport here, it's big, but you can put it in your pocket. A small passport of heritage, and we published 8,000. We gave to all the peacekeepers so that they have it in their pocket, officers and soldiers and everybody. And it was before the training on heritage, because we wanted them to be kind of obsessed with the idea and that it is something very important. What they're doing there is something very, very important. And this is the way we also present it. Here is how local masons and with local materials, the mausoleums are being reconstructed. They were very proud, the local people, of what they were doing. And this is where I'm there with the Minister of Culture, the lady in yellow. This is the Minister of Culture of Mali. With the back is the Imam that we are inaugurating the mausoleums. This is in the center is the Imam of the center, the biggest mosque in Timbuktu, Jeringaber. Now the Aleppo. It is just to show also how it was and how it was destroyed. Just some images from that, and this is also one of the souks. And now I know that Aga Khan Foundation and some others are trying to. The restoration begins, but it's a big challenge with this destroyed heritage there. So this is before and after. Once again, just to make a comparison. Here is one of the, I just wanted to show this. This is the Apamea, one of the sites in Syria. And to show on the left side is the before and after. And what you see there, it's all these holes. This is the illicit trafficking. This is the illicit, archaeological. We tend to think that making archaeology is very structured, and archaeologists here know that we think it's a very structured approach. And this looting of sites was just, digging into the ground, building these holes, destroying, and whatever you can catch, go and you sell it. So all these holes is about illicit archaeology. The same, also part of this, as you see here, illicit excavations. And this is in Samarra in Iraq. This is the very also emblematic mosque, Al-Askari Mosque. And this is how it was destroyed in 2008. And this is also some other sites. And this is the work that, under the auspices of UNESCO, also it was carried for its restoration. This is the campaign that I launched in Baghdad, in the University of Baghdad in 2015, Unite for Heritage. It was a way of responding to the extremist hate speech and discourse on the social media. And it is one of the most successful campaigns, social media campaigns that we started, because thousands of people, predominantly young people, were sharing their experiences, not just from Syria and Iraq, but all over the world, in order to pass the message of why heritage matters. And this was done by our own, I would say, creative colleagues that were there. And I remember once we had somebody from a very powerful advertising agency coming to UNESCO for another conference. They said, "Oh, which big agencies, world agency created this?" We said, "No, it's us creating it." They liked it very much, and we're very proud of this. And this is the campaign, my former colleagues, when we launched it also with UNESCO, with the former Secretary General, were all heads of agencies. We had a meeting in Paris, and I said, it's absolutely necessary that you stand behind protecting our heritage. It's a powerful message also for the world. And this is, once again, we launched it in all different places around the world. And something which I really like very much, it's culture alone is not enough to build peace, but without culture, peace cannot be lasting. I just wanted this to put here on the screen. And now I would continue with my presentation because I really believe that thinking about having a fresh look, we have a very solid basis of cultural protection because we have all the different legal framework. We have the Convention of against illicit trafficking, we have the underwater, we have intangible heritage, we have the Protection and Promotion of Cultural Diversity Convention, and all of them are critically important for this matter. Now, I think what we achieved, and I'm trying to speed up a little bit my presentation because I'm looking at Barry. I think what we could achieve is to integrate culture and heritage into the Agenda 2030, although we could have done more, the expectations were high, but still we have it. The protection of heritage is the goal 11 about sustainable cities. I think this is very important. And there are many challenges today in terms of protection of heritage. It's urbanization, it's mass tourism, it's natural disasters, it's lack of capacity and funding, and the biggest among them is climate change. And I think there is not enough understanding to what extent climate change is a threat to heritage preservation. And because it is not into the World Heritage Convention per se, I think we need to work more into analyzing what is indeed the impact of climate change. And also, because as one journalist said, the scariest part of climate change is the fact that we won't be able to undo the damage done, and that we won't be able to extricate Venice or New Orleans from the sea. Their disappearance will be a net loss regardless of what mountainside civilizations someday will arise. So I think, and I'm ending also with this, the vision of heritage, what reminds me here, speaking about heritage and humanism, it reminds me of Shakespeare's King Lear, because this is perhaps also what Gloucester meant when speaking to the king on the heath. When King Lear asked him, "How do you see the world?" Gloucester answered, "I see it feelingly." I believe education, culture, heritage allows us to see the world not just as it is, separate, distant, but as part of each of us. And I believe Cambridge also is a place where the world is seen feelingly at a time when this has never been so important. Thank you for your attention.